Good morning. Good morning. You know, before I begin, I just want to tell you how much I love this school. I woke up this morning and I saw that crisp, cold air, pre-dawn morning in Ohio. I live in California now. We haven't had weather there for 5 years, so it's extraordinary to come back to the snow. It's a beautiful place. And I got a tour this morning of the academy and some of the classes, and I'm just astonished. Not just at the level of education that you get, it's fantastic here, the quality, the curriculum, the outstanding faculty that you have. As a returning alum, I'm really moved by that. So I wanted to just start with that note and say, Happy New Year, welcome back. Many people are hoping that this year will be better than last year. Last year came as a shock to quite a few people. You probably noticed that many people were wrong in 2016. All of the experts and analysts and journalists and pundits found themselves quite wrong, surprisingly wrong, about Trump, about Brexit, about Russia, and a number of other things. So what we're experiencing right now, I believe, is an era of uncertainty, a time of tremendous uncertainty. And for most people, that makes them very nervous. We like to know that the train is going to show up on time, and when you flip a switch that the lights will go on, and when you pick up a phone that there'll be dial tone. When those things don't happen, we get kind of nervous about it. So most people are very, very, very uncomfortable to know that we're living in a time of uncertainty, sudden dislocations, sudden transformations. But I also see this as an opportunity to learn. I see this as an opportunity for us to gain new insight, to be kind of goaded or prodded into learning something new. And certainly a lot of experts last year found themselves having to master a new learning curve. So uncertainty is a time of trauma, shock, maybe a little resistance, but it's also a time where we can learn new things. It'll open up some new doors for us, because we all know that failure is the best school teacher, right? So when you make a guess, you make an estimate, you make a projection or an analysis, and it goes wrong, that's definitely embarrassing and it sucks for a moment, but then you realize actually the next time you're going to get it right. You're going to keep trying. This is the fundamental principle behind all learning. It's actually how we advance society. That's the principle behind the scientific principle that helps us advance as a society. We try things, we make a hypothesis, we test that hypothesis in the real world, and we get it wrong. Well, then we go back to the drawing board, we test things out, we maybe change our hypothesis, we iterate on the concept, and we keep doing that until we get it right, and eventually we stumble upon brilliant insights, and that is how we move things forward. So failure is no fun. It's embarrassing and awkward, but it is what the learning process consists of, and every single one of us in this room has learned a lesson the hard way. And I know that you, like me, once you learn something the hard way, you're never going to do that again. So you learn the lesson really well. So failure is a strict schoolmaster, but it can actually teach us lessons in the best way. There's a particular type of failure, though, that I want to focus on today. It's a failure of the imagination. It's rather different. This isn't a situation where you have incorrect information or you make incorrect assumptions and then you test them in the real world. This is a different thing. This is where you have all the information that you need to make an intelligent decision, but you simply can't imagine that possibility can happen, and you reject the information. So it's a failure of the imagination. The information's there. The information is solid. And surprisingly, this happens more often than you would think, where people are presented with facts and information, and yet they reject it. I think today in the United States, in particular, we're suffering through an epidemic of ignorance. I'm not kidding. I mean, you see evidence of this all the time, all around you. Now, ignorance on its own, well, that's no great shame. That's nothing new. Every human being is born in a state of ignorance. But some of us stay there for our whole lives. The purpose of a civilization, the purpose of society, the purpose of institutions like Western Reserve Academy is to elevate us from that state of natural ignorance, to train us how to use the intellectual tools at our disposal and use those tools to further the advances of society. That's how we grow, that's how we expand, that's how we improve everything, not just the economy. That's how we improve all of our society. We take the learnings that were hard-won from previous generations and we apply them so that we don't make mistakes like this. But a surprising number of Americans choose not to do that. And that I find quite extraordinary. The paradox of our time is that we are awash in information. We have more data at our fingertips than any previous generation, and yet large numbers of Americans choose to ignore that information. This is ignorance as a lifestyle choice, and it confounds me. It's astonishing to me that it can happen, and yet it's persistent. We see evidence of it every single day. You saw it during the election, the flood of fake news that misinformed people and fooled the global people and actually ended up having some impact on the election. You see this with conspiracy websites. There are zillions of these things, manufacturing fake information for people, and many people consume it. People seem to like it. It's sort of sensational to them. And there are real impacts from this. There are a group of people who deny climate change, even though the vast majority of scientists are in total agreement that climate change is really happening and that it is caused by the human population. Yet there's a group of people that reject this science. There are people who reject vaccines. They come up with kooky ideas about what vaccines might be responsible for. There are groups of people who reject genetically modified food for unscientific reasons. There are people who reject the theory of evolution and embrace a fantasy, a fiction called creationism. This is persistent in our culture today. And I find this a very peculiar thing to be happening at a time when we have more information than ever before at our fingertips. There's a term for this. There's a term for this. A term in psychology is called cognitive dissonance, and it's the idea that when you get two conflicting ideas in your head, it causes intense discomfort. It causes people to feel very uncomfortable. It's very challenging. Imagine if you have a deeply held conviction, something you grew up believing, and now new information is presented to you, and that new information cancels out that conviction. It renders it null, it renders it irrelevant. That's a very challenging thing, right? Because that conviction you have is part of your identity. You really believe it in your core. But here comes some scientist or some technologist or some futurist who's going to tell you something new. It's different. That kind of renders that belief that you have null and void. Most people, given that situation, would feel intense discomfort, and we label that cognitive dissonance. Cognitive because it's in your brain, dissonance because it's like two bad sounds that don't fit together harmoniously, and so it causes kind of a negative brainstorm. Now, what most people do when they experience cognitive dissonance is that they reject the new information. They don't change their beliefs. They don't change their convictions. They don't change that part of their identity that is so deeply grounded in them. So instead, they reject the new information. And I think the examples I just gave you are illustrations of that. You see, what's happening is we're producing information at a rate that is unprecedented in human society. We're generating more information faster than ever before. And it's growing at an exponential rate. We're generating gigabytes and petabytes and exabytes and now zettabytes of data each year as a society. In the past, a new principle might have been discovered, a new philosophical idea, or a new scientific discovery, but it would often take a full generation before that information could be properly integrated into society. Today, we're having breakthroughs at that level on a weekly basis. It's simply too much for many people to keep up with. We're literally blowing our minds. And so we have kind of an epidemic, I think, of cognitive dissonance. I learned about this concept when I was a student here at Western Reserve Academy. Cognitive dissonance was a term that was introduced to me by Dr. Ann Chapman, who was one of the teachers. She taught sociology, history here. And as a sophomore in 1978, she taught us about cognitive dissonance. She didn't just teach us the concept, she actually gave us an example of it, which I'm going to share with you in a second. It's kind of funny to look at these pictures, these old pictures of the Academy, because it's so very different today to come walk around West Reserve Academy. Here's what I looked like as a sophomore. Oh, sorry, I'm going to go back up one. So Dr. Chapman's, her example to demonstrate cognitive dissonance to us was this statement she made to my sophomore class. Half the people in this room will work in jobs that have not yet been invented. Now today that might seem perfectly obvious, but back in 1978, that was unthinkable. This is what I looked like in 1978. Here, that's me as a sophomore. You like that picture? This is me as a freshman, so I was even dorkier looking as a freshman. That's registration in 1977. But anyway, back to sophomore year. So my entire class kind of looked like that, and we just laughed out loud when she said that. So Dr. Chapman said, half the people in this class are going to work in a job that hasn't been invented yet. And we rejected it. And she had all the evidence to explain why that was going to be the case. But I remember that we rejected it. So there's our cognitive dissonance. We sat there going, wait a minute, we're going to do what our parents did. We're going to be doctors and lawyers and insurance salesmen and teachers. And we're not going to have to invent a new job. That seems utterly ridiculous. But the funny part about her story happened to me about 8 years ago. I was in Australia to do a talk, and at the end of the talk, there was a question from the floor, and someone asked me about my own career. And they asked me how I had arrived at the point that I was at in my career. And so I started thinking through the different jobs that I had, and it occurred to me that I had never had a job that existed before I took that job. So in my case, Dr. Chapman was 100% right when she said that we were going to work in jobs that hadn't been invented yet. Every job that I had, every job I've ever had, did not exist before I took it. The first job I had coming out of college was to become a music video director. Well, there weren't music videos in 1978. Then I worked for MTV. MTV didn't exist in 1978. Cable TV was barely a thing in 1978. And then I started launching MTV channels around the world, in Asia and Latin America and so on. And certainly satellite television was something that did not exist in 1978. And then I got interested in the internet and computer games. I started one of the first computer game companies in 1993. There were personal computers in the 1970s, but very few. They were very, very expensive, and they really weren't consumerized until the 1980s. And there certainly wasn't a video game industry in the 1970s, so that job was entirely new. And so gradually, I realized when I was giving this explanation in Australia, it occurred to me that Dr. Chapman was totally right. That was like a 20-year span or 25-year span between when she made that statement to me as a sophomore in high school, and then 25 years later, I finally worked my way through the cognitive dissonance, and I realized that she was actually correct. I'd rejected it initially, and it took that long for it to percolate through my brain to understand that my entire career has consisted of jobs that had never existed before, and I've now turned that into my career mission. It informs me. It's my raison d'etre. It's my purpose. I love this. I'm thrust into situations every single week with brand new companies. I don't just invent jobs. Now I create companies, and sometimes we invent entirely new industries. I'll give you an example. In 1999, I was working at a TV studio, Sony Pictures Entertainment, one of the big movie studios in Los Angeles. And one of the engineers on my team came to me and said, hey, I found a company that can put video on a cell phone. Now today, that's totally commonplace, video on a cell phone. But back in 1999, your mobile phone barely worked for phone calls. To put video on it was preposterous. So naturally, I joined that company. I thought, why not? Let's go do it. And I became the president there, and I led that team to the first commercial launch of video on mobile phones in 2000. Now, everyone that I knew in the TV industry thought I was crazy. They said, the TV guy's trying to put television on a phone. That's crazy. It will never work. Even our customers, the mobile phone companies, they said, how is this possible? It can't work. You can't fit a TV signal through a mobile network, through a mobile voice network. How can we possibly do it? Even when we showed it to them, they were still skeptical. There's the resistance. When you're going to innovate, when you're going to launch a new business, you're going to get used to the idea that you're going to run into that kind of resistance. We didn't let that deter us. It didn't stop us. We found that a great challenge that we could rise to meet. So every time someone told us it was impossible to put video on a phone, that spurred us to work harder to show them that it was indeed possible. So that's the mission. That's my career mission. And I think I'm going to present this to you as a choice. This is your career choice. So one person's version of impossible is another person's opportunity. It's like a fork in the road. You can choose to stick with what you know. You can keep the information that you already know and just reject the new information and say it's not possible. Or you can embrace that possibility and say, well, what if? What would happen if that happened? How might we do that? This is going to confront you again and again and again in your career because the world is changing so very quickly. So every single person in this room is going to have that choice. To stick with what you know, or to embrace new information and launch something that everyone else thinks is implausible, preposterous, and impossible. You'll have the opportunity to prove them wrong and demonstrate the possible. So here's my prediction for you. I'm going to build on what Ann Chapman taught me. My prediction is that every person in this room, including the faculty, in their career will work at least one job that did not exist. In many cases, that will be your entire career, will be inventing new jobs. Is there anyone here who's skeptical about that claim? If so, you're probably suffering from cognitive dissonance. I think it's safe to say that this is going to happen. I can make this prediction confidently because I'm familiar with the inexorable march of progress in technology that underpins our society. Science and technology continue to make steady advances and numerous breakthroughs along the way. What you're looking at here is the shrinking of memory. On the left side, the very first external hard drive, look how big that thing is. In in 1956, and it cost $120,000 for 5 megabytes of RAM. Shrunk it down to something you put on your fingertip, and now 128 gigabytes of RAM, because that's, of course, will continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And what that means is we'll be able to embed computing power. The same thing's happening with microprocessors, the same thing's happening in connectivity. All the parts that make a computer are being miniaturized, and then we will be able to embed connectivity and intelligence into just about every device that has a power supply. And that's going to transform the world. That's just the first stage. And we're going to start to install sensors in just about every environment that you're in. So we'll have a responsive world, a world that can track your presence, respond to you, understand that you're there, present relevant information in context that you're in. It'll be like a completely, it'll be an environment that's completely designed for computing, a completely responsive environment. I know that that's coming. It may take 10 or 20 years before that's reality, but that's on the path. You'll experience that in your career. So we're in this massive shift right now. Right now. We're shifting from the industrial era. The last 300 years were defined by industry. We're shifting now into the information age. We've been talking about the information age for decades, but it's finally here, where the primary product of society is information. We're replicating that, amplifying it, building upon it, expanding upon it so rapidly. Now, the information age is completely different than the industrial age. The industrial age is all about stability, predictability, certainty. The information age is about sudden dislocations, surprises, and uncertainty. That is the tenor of the society that we're building. It's an unstable, rapidly changing environment. And that's why I can make that prediction about your future career with such great confidence. Because one thing I know is that we're going to be reinventing just about every industry, and along the way you'll reinvent your job, you'll probably reinvent your company, and you may very well reinvent the industry. The defining characteristic of this new era is that whatever can be expressed as information will be. And my belief is that we all have tremendous amounts of information in our heads, in our bodies, encoded into the buildings around us and in the physical products that we use. What everyone's trying to do right now in the technology industry is find ways to liberate that information that's encoded or locked in your head, locked in a physical product, liberate that information, make it accessible, put it in the cloud, and it takes on a life of its own at that point. That's the great project of our time. That's one of the ways we're generating so much information. We're freeing information from physical form. And then the information can be available on any device, on any kind of screen. This is a tremendous opportunity ahead. I want to focus on one example of this: robotics, artificial intelligence, and software automation, because it's going to be so very pertinent to you and your careers. Now, usually when we think of robots, we think of something cute, like a toy. And frankly, that's how we're often introduced to robots. But in fact, robots have been around for 30 years or more in industrial capacity. If you go to an auto plant in Detroit or anywhere in the world now, you won't find human workers in the auto plant, in the body plant. You'll find robots. They assemble machines. You can think of a car factory as like a giant machine itself. You put parts in one end and a car chassis comes out the other side. And along the way, it's all handled by robots. So that's not new. That technology has been around. Of course, it's been improving, but it's been around for decades. What is new is that the robots are leaving the factory. Now, increasingly, the robot is going to be the car that comes out of the factory. Robotic vehicles are a terrific illustration of the application of artificial intelligence and robotics in the field today. Of course, it's still very new, and it's still in trial mode, but it's changing very rapidly. Just 5 years ago, when I first started to hear about Google's autonomous vehicle program, I rejected it. I was like, that's ridiculous. A robot vehicle, that's just never going to happen. I mean, Google's a cool company, but they're a search engine. What do they know about robotics? What do they know about driving a car? What do they know about vehicle safety and laws? What about liability laws? How can all this stuff change to accommodate a robot car? That was in 2010. Today it's 2016. We're informed by visions of personal transportation that'll come pick us up, kind of like your own personal Uber. Whenever you need transportation, it'll come to you as a service. That's the vision. Where we are right now is in Singapore. I was in Singapore about 8 months ago, and they were the first to deploy robot vehicles as a taxi cab, a trial service. Of course, now this fall, Uber did the same thing in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They're with Ford Motors and Volvo. They're testing out robot taxis. They're not fully autonomous, but still a human driver, but they're testing the principle. Similar testing is happening in California, Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, Florida, and about 14 other cities around the world. This is in Japan, and there's another example from Greenwich in the UK. The point that I'm making here is the same point I made a moment ago. It's an idea. The robot vehicle is an idea that was preposterous and struck everyone as impossible just 5 years ago. Today, it's really quickly moving into something that seems quite plausible. And I guarantee you 10 years from now, it's going to be perfectly normal. We'll take it for granted at that point, and we're only going to complain about it if it doesn't show up on time. That's the only time we're going to experience any kind of disconnection with that. But that's how quickly ideas can go from plausible to believable to practical and then totally normal. Just a 15-year span. It probably sounds like a long time for some of the younger people in the room, but it isn't very long in your career. 15-year span is not a very long period of time. It's not just robot vehicles, by the way. We're starting to see robots appear everywhere. There's a fully robotized hotel in Tokyo. 90% of the tasks in the hotel are performed by robots. It's just 10% of the jobs are done by human beings. So the person who checks you in is a robot, the person who makes your bed is a robot. If you order something from room service, it's delivered by a robot. It's a bit of a gimmick, but the idea is to accustom people to the notion of robot service. Japan tends to be on the very leading edge of robotics technology, particularly as it touches human beings and consumers. Here in Berlin, in this photo in Berlin, there's a robot bartender who will make a drink to your preference. There are two robot restaurants I'm familiar with now. One is in San Francisco and one is in Beijing. So that's robot restaurants. Perhaps a little bit more serious note is robotics as an aid. Here you see an example of robotic surgery. You know those big robots, the industrial robots I showed you a moment ago from the car factory, those are quite dangerous. Those robots, you can't go near them as a human being. They're shielded off. They're kind of fenced in so that humans can't get in the way. Because those robots are deaf, dumb, and blind. They can't see it. They're just moving very quickly with their big mechanical arms. And if you get in the way, they'll kill you. There have been 3 deaths by robots in factories. So they're quite dangerous. With the new generation of robots, we can actually trust them with our lives. They can help us with surgery. They can make a suture or injection more accurate than a human being can. And so here you see robots as an enhancement. They're going to bring skills to people that we don't actually have. They'll improve human skill. And we're starting to gradually see robots in retail environments as well. Like here, a robot that's managing inventory in the store. These Pepper robots from SoftBank are being tested in the United States to guide people who are shopping. Of course, in Japan, they're far ahead of us because they were trying to now develop robots that actually look like, in some respects, respond like human beings as well. A little bit creepy because they haven't quite crossed what we call the uncanny valley. We're so close to real, but not quite, that it kind of creeps us out. That's where they are right now at this stage. So you might say, well, science fiction is the new normal. Things that we used to read about in science fiction paperbacks now are becoming day-to-day reality around us. You can see this unfold. For me, this is the most exciting time ever in history to be a human being. For me, it's incredible that in your own lifetime you can have an idea and bring it to fruition and grow it as a business so very quickly. But there's also kind of a challenge presented by robots. Because there's no question about what robots do. Robots destroy jobs. Robots replace labor. Most of the examples I showed you so far have been either in service jobs or manufacturing jobs. There's a real impact now. We know this, that robots lead to falling wages, of course, right? Because robots are just an alternative supply of labor, so the price of human labor is going to drop. Basic law of economics when you have an oversupply. So Larry Summers, respected economist, pointed out that robots are hurting workers, and it's not just a task for education to retrain those workers. That's not the sole solution for this problem. I'll get to solutions in a moment. If you take a look at this chart from The Economist, you'll see that actually manufacturing jobs have been declining in the United States for a long time anyway. Robotics is going to simply reduce manufacturing jobs down to something like the level of agricultural jobs. What's interesting about agriculture is back at the turn of the century, last century, when 1900, most U.S. jobs were agriculture-based jobs. The majority of work in 1900 was done on farms. But over the last 100 years, now we have something on the order of like 3% of the workforce is working in the agriculture group. We still have plenty of food. In fact, we produce far more food today than we did in 1900, but we do with a lot less labor. That's efficiency, that's productivity, that's a benefit. It makes everybody in the country richer. The same thing is going to happen with manufacturing. So as robots replace human workers in factories, you'll find that goods cost less, they're probably going to be better made with some improvements. But the next area to focus on, you can imagine, if you were an economist, you'd say, what about that gray line at the top, services? Because as human workers migrate out of physical manufacturing tasks, where we're migrating to is service jobs, service level jobs. Now, we've had incredible efficiency in production in manufacturing and agriculture, but we have not had those same productivity gains in services. So we're very inefficient. Human workers are very inefficient in services. And so that's the next focus for automation. And my belief is that whatever can be automated will be. There are literally thousands of software companies trying to find ways to automate service jobs right now. And this causes some people great distress, because now we see that the robots are coming after our jobs as well. Software robots, software automation can now replace clerical workers in companies. When you call a company and you go through a voicemail system, that used to be a job that was done by a human operator, a human receptionist. No longer. Companies don't have receptionists anymore. They simply buy a PBX and a voicemail system, and that's handled automatically. It's software automation. We're starting to see that these jobs, these software robots can come after office jobs. They can come after professional workers. For instance, when we had an earthquake 2 years ago in LA, there was a little earthquake. And the Los Angeles Times building, of course, was vacated because there was an earthquake. So all the workers, all the human workers were out on the street. The first story that hit the wire about the earthquake was written by robot software, narrative science software program was still running on a laptop computer. And so that article was published while the human reporters were out on the street. It's kind of an astonishing thing. Now, I talked to a journalist, I talked to an editor of a Midwestern newspaper. I asked him about narrative science. I said, are you concerned about narrative science? Is it going to displace human writers? Is it going to replace journalists? He said, absolutely not. We've been having newsroom cuts and staff cuts for the last 20 years. This is great. If I can get a robot to write all the day-to-day stuff, the sports coverage, the stock analysis, I can then free a human worker to do better investigative journalism. So one effect of software automation is that it displaces workers. It's not necessarily a negative effect. It might elevate us. It might free us to focus on a task that's better suited to a human being. And now we're at the very early stages of deployment of artificial intelligence. You encounter this every day when you use Google, or when you use Microsoft software, when you use online translation. That's all being done by artificial intelligence, and increasingly we're handing tests off to artificial intelligence. Now there's great fear that artificial intelligence will eventually exceed human intelligence, so we're creating kind of like the successor to the human species in software. That's a fear that many different people have. I think it's overblown. I think that's like being afraid of a dishwasher or a refrigerator or something. I do think artificial intelligence is going to redefine jobs drastically. And again, this is why I can be so confident in my prediction that you will be working in jobs that we can't even conceive of yet. When I wrote my book, I interviewed Kevin Kelly, who was the executive editor of Wired and author of a number of brilliant books himself. I asked him about artificial intelligence. He said, Rob, I can tell you the business case for the next 10,000 startups. Take anything, add artificial intelligence. He said that we're going to add artificial intelligence the same way in the 1930s we added electricity to factories and radically transform manufacturing. We're going to radically transform the services industry with artificial intelligence. So in the future, because of artificial intelligence, robotics, and software automation, we're going to find that jobs that humans no longer have to do. Many of those tasks will be done by robots. But there'll also be a category of jobs that nobody has to do, because those industries will be rendered irrelevant. That seems confounding to you. Think about it. There was a time when there were lamplighters. There was a lamplighter who would have to go down the streets when we had gas-lit lamps in cities. Every night, that person would have to walk around and light each of the lamps. The job's been automated away. There were people who put horseshoes on horses, blacksmiths. Those jobs are gone. Candle makers and so on. So throughout history, humanity has always made progress by automating certain jobs. We replace them. Sometimes we actually replace the entire industry. People don't burn candles anymore for illumination. We burn them for atmosphere, of course. But we don't need them for illumination. The electric lights, electricity renders that entire industry irrelevant. You're going to see that occur again and again and again. My advice to you is pick a sunrise industry. Don't pick a sunset industry. Pick an industry where there's going to be growth in the future. Don't pick an industry that's going to get automated out of existence. Now, there'll be another category of jobs, like the surgical job I showed you, where software automation and robotics and AI will actually improve human capacity. Those jobs will be enhanced by software. That's a field that you want to look at. In the future, you're going to be tested as an employee in a company. They'll see how compatible are you with robots. How well do you work with software? How well can you deal with an AI? If you're able to master those things, then you'll be the manager. If not, you'll probably be reporting to a robot. If you think that statement is preposterous, think about Uber drivers. Every time I get in an Uber, I talk to the driver. It's fascinating. You know Uber, the car service. And I ask the driver, who's your boss? And they say, I'm an independent business person. I don't have a boss. I love this job. I set my own hours. I start when I want to. I stop when I want to. I'm free as a bird. I'm like, that's kind of cool, but who tells you where to pick the passenger up? They say, well, the app tells me that. And I say, oh, so you work for an app? They say, no, I'm an independent businessman. I said, oh, okay, great. So then when you drop the passenger off, who knows that you dropped the passenger off? And it doesn't, oh, the app tracks that too. I said, said, okay, so the app is assigning you a task, and the app knows when the task is done. So you have a task management program that you work for. If you work for a robot, you're probably a biological robot, and your job is probably destined to be automated as well. It's something to be concerned about. Uber's been very clear. They're on a mission to replace human drivers. And I would point out, parenthetically, that the #1 profession, the profession that employs the most people in the United States is truck driver. And that job is earmarked for full automation. So there are jobs that will be improved and enhanced, but there's other jobs that will be wiped out of existence by robotics. There'll also be jobs that humans could never previously do. For example, deep sea exploration and deep space exploration. I now know of several startup companies that are focused on mining asteroids in space. As nutty as that idea sounds, there are several. These are companies with investors. These investors believe the science is there, the technology is there, and they're focused on launching spacecraft, fully robotized spacecraft. So these are jobs that never previously could have been done. In the past, asteroid was something to look at through a telescope. That was as close as we could get to it. And finally, there'll be a category of jobs retrieved from the past. Skills that we previously had, but we discarded because we automated them away, but they'll be retrieved. An example would be some forms of fabrication are going to be retrieved from the past. Things like 3D printing will enable us to do skilled labor, skilled craft work that previously was just too expensive for us to do, and so we designed it out of our buildings, and I think that'll be retrieved in the future. So you're going to start to see some massive changes in the job market in the future, driven by software automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence. The message I have to give to you, though, is that you need to get ready. You don't have a great deal of time. If you're a senior, you have 4 more years before you're in the workforce. And I want to encourage you to use that time effectively. And yes, I'm trying to speak to you with a sense of urgency, because I believe you are going to graduate into an economy where we are destroying jobs faster than we can invent new ones. So it's time for you to start to really focus as you study on the skills that you have that are going to be transportable into the future, into this unpredictable, uncertain future. Now, the good news about attending a school like Western Reserve Academy is that you're going to be well equipped for that future. I certainly didn't take any courses in digital media or software when I was here. They weren't available at that time. I studied English literature in college. You could say I was fit to be, maybe employable as a teacher, perhaps. But I haven't spent any time in my career doing that. The skills I got at this school and later in college are those that guided me and made me adaptable, malleable, nimble, flexible, able to learn and master new things so that I can pursue my own independent career. So I believe you're being equipped with the right skills. I had the occasion to visit 2 of the classes this morning here, and I have to tell you, I am incredibly impressed by the level of education at this school. So I believe that you're being prepared for this. This might seem like a scary statement that I'm sharing with you right now, this notion that jobs are being destroyed faster than new ones can be created, but I don't want you to be bummed out or disappointed or dismayed or deterred by that, because I believe you are being equipped and outfitted with all the skills that you need. Don't hit the panic button. There's no reason to hit the panic button. What you want to focus on is being future. You want to optimize those skills that can't be replicated by a computer. And I'm going to share 3 with you. Don't worry, this is not hard. This is not like a workout. This is an effortless workout you can do. You can do it in your spare time. But as you proceed from Western Reserve Academy into the college you choose to attend, these are some of the things I want you to bear in mind. Because when you go to college, you're going to be inundated with opportunities to waste time. It's true. Parties, fun things, tailgate parties, you go watch a game. There's an enormous amount of fun stuff to do in college. I definitely do that. That's part of the college experience. But the other thing you're going to get to do in college is try new things and learn new things and stretch your brain even more than Western Reserve Academy has done for you. And I really want to encourage you to do that. 3 things in specific. I want you to remember that curiosity is the core skill behind all innovation. Every invention was spurred by someone who was curious about why do things work the way they do, and why can't they work a different way, and how might they be better. Every creative genius, every artist and author was spurred by curiosity. Curiosity is the wellspring of the imagination. Curiosity is behind all of our science, all of our technology, all of our advancement in our society. So curiosity is a core skill that I want to encourage you to foster and cultivate. Now, when I was at Western Reserve Academy, I took a creative writing class from John Roberts, who's a great English teacher. And he taught me many great things, but one of the things he told us, he said, if you're going to be a writer, don't take the express route through life. Take the slow route, take the scenic route, stop, look at things, get curious about the world around you. That's great advice. It's not just great advice. It's not just great advice for a writer. It's great advice for a world that's changing so fast. Get in the habit of asking yourself some questions. Why are things the way they are? Why do these things work this way? And why don't they work another way? And how? How did we discover that? How does that thing work? How might it be different? Start to ask yourself those questions. Too many of us accept technology as a given, and we don't drill deep enough underneath it to find out how it actually works and how it might be improved. Those who do are the people who change the future. Those who do, who ask those questions routinely and habitually, those are the people that change the world that we live in. I want to encourage you to be one of those people. Don't be on the receiving end of technological advances. You want to be on the development, you want to be that on the side that is spurring that level of innovation. The second concept I want you to build on, the second skill that I want you to cultivate, is compassion. Now this is going to seem like a curveball. Most people think of compassion as kind of sympathy. It's like, oh, you feel sorry for somebody else who's got a problem. That's selling it very, very short. That's an understatement. Compassion is very, very, very profound human feeling. It's a profound human capacity, but it is underdeveloped in most of us, and in particular in American society. We don't cultivate our compassion. I want to spur you to cultivate the capacity for compassion. Too often in our society, too often we're disconnected from the pain that other people feel. People suffer real pain in this world. Compassion for other people's feelings is a skill that a robot or computer will never have. It cannot. It doesn't feel anything. That's a deeply human skill. That's going to be one of the things that sets us apart so much from the machines. Now you might say that empathy, the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes and see things their way, is connected to compassion. It's sort of like a lightweight version of compassion. And every job in the world involves some element of selling, whether you're a salesperson, a marketing person, or a product designer, or even a person just presenting their own labor to work to the labor market to a boss. You're having to sell yourself. Everybody is selling something. And so salesmanship, the essence of salesmanship is empathy, right? You put yourself in the other person's shoes, you have to kind of imagine the world from their point of view, and then you have to extol the benefits of whatever it is you're selling in a way that will actually match up with the needs of that person. So that's empathy. That's empathy. But the strange things happen in our workforce. There's a writer named Joel Beck-Kahn who wrote a book called The Corporations, a very clever book. And in that book, he asserts that American corporations are not altruistic. He says they're sociopathic. Because a corporation in the United States is considered a legal entity, like a person. So it's legal as a person, but it doesn't operate like a person. It has no compassion, it has no empathy, it doesn't care about other people, it doesn't care about the environment that it operates in. And so we have corporations that operate out of control because they lack human empathy, they lack compassion. Now here's the interesting thing. You're probably likely to end up working for a corporation, most of us do. And when you work in that corporation, your natural ambition is going to cause you to conform to the ideals and the values that are expressed by that corporation. The number one value of the corporation is profit maximization and shareholder value. It isn't giving back to the community. It isn't corporate giving or social responsibility. They talk about those things, but actions speak louder than words. And some people who work in corporations fall into this trap where they're brainwashed. They sleepwalk into a corporation and they commit egregious acts of irresponsibility because they've lost touch with human empathy. They've lost touch with compassion. And that's how we get a company like Volkswagen that manufactures cars that lie to their drivers and lie to regulators. That's a sociopathic thing to do. A bank like Wells Fargo that foisted phony accounts on their customers. Millions of customers. Fraudulent activity. And we see this through every sector of the economy. Fake news sites that take advantage of the goal of people. These are sociopathic companies. So there's a tendency in a corporation to kind of mirror the values expressed by that corporation. If that corporation has bad values, you might end up being a person with bad values. Don't be that person. You want to be this guy. You want to be someone who's driven by joy. The joy that comes from alleviating other people's problems. And to do that, you need to cultivate a sense of compassion, deep compassion for other people, particularly for people who are suffering. Not to take advantage of them, not to sell them something, but actually help them. Now, there's going to be some skeptic in this room or someone who sees this video, and they're going to say, wait a minute, hang on a second, how is that a good business? You just said that corporations are out there to maximize profit. How can that be a good business? I learned firsthand that compassion can be the #1 value in a company when I worked for Oprah Winfrey. Here's a person who begins every day with compassion and ends every day with compassion. Every meeting she starts with, she says, what is our intention? And don't tell me the intention is to make a lot of money because you know I don't care about that. How are we going to serve other people? Remember, most jobs in the economy are service jobs. Think about that word, service. At the core of service is compassion. If you break the word down, compassion means with, passion means love, with love. Approach your jobs with love for other people, and you will be deeply successful in a way that a robot can never challenge you. Now, how do you cultivate this? How do you cultivate this skill? What exercise can you do? One way to do it is to teach somebody something. Every person in this room knows something that I don't know. Teach somebody something. Coach a sport, coach a team, coach a little league team. Be a tutor. That's one way. What your teachers do here is they teach with compassion. They approach the subject matter and the students with love. And they want to impart that to you, that knowledge to you. That is a skill that a robot cannot do. Another way to master this skill is to sell something. Anything. It doesn't matter if you're selling lemonade or frozen yogurt or insurance policies. It forces you to think about the customer from a different perspective. You have to think about the world from the customer's perspective. That's a great way to learn compassion, a great way to learn empathy. The third way, I think, is to do volunteer work for a charity. And when you do volunteer work for a charity, remember, you're not doing it necessarily solely to help other people. You're actually helping yourself. Because every time you volunteer, every time you give up yourself, you're building that immense reservoir of human compassion within you. And that is going to be a key survival skill in this uncertain future. There's a third message I have for you today, a third skill. It is courage. To approach things with courage. When I was in my late 20s, I was the head of on-air creative for MTV. It's the greatest job in the world. I loved it. It's in New York. But I noticed that all of our audience was going over to playing video games. And this new thing called dial-up internet, bulletin board services, this is 1993. So I went to the management of MTV and I said, we need to get into the internet, we need to get into computers, we need to get into game software. And they said, you're out of your mind. We're a TV company. We're not going to do that stuff. We're focused on making a TV channel. And so I quit that job. And I moved to California. Even though I loved that job at MTV, I had the courage of my convictions. I could see so clearly from the research that's where our audience was going. And so I went out to California. I started a game company. And 2 years later, I took that company public. And I never looked back at TV the same way. I want to encourage you to do that. And one way to practice courage, one way to build that muscle, is think twice before you say no. That was advice one of my big brothers gave me before I went to Germany when I studied there as a student. I didn't know German. Like kind of a whim in college, I decided to go to Germany. I took an immersion course, and I did learn German. I learned a great many other things as well. And my brother's advice, his only advice before I left, was think twice before you say no. What a great way to go through college. As I said earlier, you're going to be confronted with many opportunities to spend your time in different ways. Some of them constructive, some of them just fun. What I encourage you to do in college is to try new things. If someone says, hey, go audition for a play, say yes. If someone says, hey, let's try out for that team, say yes. If someone says, let's go to a country we've never been to but we don't speak the language, say yes to that opportunity. If someone says, hey, wouldn't it be cool to take an orienteering class and go out in the middle of the woods and get totally lost and have to find our own way back, don't say no, think twice. Say yes to that opportunity. Every one of these is a chance for you to test out your courage and to build that muscle up. Because in the future, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get a job and you're going to get comfortable and you're going to get a house and you're going to get married and you're going to get kids and you're going to settle down and get cozy. And that's when you're vulnerable. That's when you need the job. But if you keep exercising that muscle of courage, of having the courage of your convictions and acting on your courage, you'll have the courage to walk away from the cozy job and take the new challenge. That's going to be essential to your survival in this world of uncertainty. So these 3 skills, I think, are a great building block. I think you're getting exposed to them right now, maybe through osmosis, just by being on campus and being exposed to so many different people from different walks of life and so many new ideas here at the Academy. I want to encourage you to continue to build these 3 skills as you go into college. These skills of curiosity, compassion, and courage. Carry that with you. It's been my honor and a real privilege to be here, and I want to thank the Morgan Foundation for your generosity and support. Thank you.